Passover is here. What do I do? Hey everyone, my name is Matthew Vanderels, pastor at Founded in Truth Fellowship, and with Passover just around the corner, it is of utmost importance that we as Christians examine our hearts and prepare ourselves for one of the most significant days in all of the Bible. Passover is a day that memorializes God's redemptive power and victory over the forces of oppression. The story of the Exodus starts a long time ago in ancient Egypt. The Bible tells us that Israelites found themselves enslaved under the oppressive regime of Pharaoh, and they cried out to God for redemption. God responds by sending numerous plagues that crush the Egyptian empire. He then commands the Israelites to engage in this strange ceremony that involves taking a lamb, preparing it, and then killing it. The lamb must die, and the Israelites must eat its flesh and then take its blood and put it on the doorposts of their homes. The blood acts as a type of symbol of a covenant with God and protects them from a final plague sent upon Egypt, the messenger of death. The blood saves them. And the Israelites leave Egypt and they travel 3 days into the wilderness, and God splits the Red Sea for them to cross through. The Apostle Paul actually calls this event the baptism of Moses. When they walked through the waters, they were no longer a nation of slaves, but they were a nation birthed out of God's victorious redemption. Jesus, or Yeshua, speaks of this event during his Last Supper with his disciples, when he uses the symbols and the legend of this story to explain what is about to happen through him and his death on the cross. He picks up the bread and he says, "Eat of it, this is my flesh." And he picks up the wine and he says, "Drink of it, this is the blood of the new covenant." Something big is about to happen, something bigger than ever before. Redemption is coming that will be like the first Passover, but far greater. A victory and freedom is coming that will be like the first Exodus, but far greater. This Exodus won't be from slavery to Egypt or freedom from the oppressive powers of Pharaoh. This Exodus will be from the slavery of sin and the freedom from the oppressive forces of death, the things that hold our hearts captive and separate us from God. And so, as we prepare for this memorial of the true Passover lamb, Yeshua, we also prepare our hearts and our homes. That's right, our homes too. See, Passover kicks off a week-long festival known as the Festival of Unleavened Bread. It's a week where you are to refrain from eating any leavened bread. It represents a type of transition from one life to another, from slavery to redemption. Exodus 12:15 states, "7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the first day you shall remove leaven out of your homes." Verse 17 says, "And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt." Why do we need to get leavening out of our homes? Well, leavening represents the things that give rise to a life without God. Sin and pride, those things within the human heart that distance us from God. And God is giving us a clear picture of how transformative and life-changing His redemption is. The way we lived before has died, and we are now a new creation. The Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:6-8, "Your boasting is not good. Don't you know that a little leavening leavens the whole batch of dough? Get rid of the old leavening so that you may be a new unleavened batch, as you really are. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us keep the feast, the festival, not with old bread leavened with malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." So this practice is like a ritual that depicts the purging of leavening from our homes, but should also reflect, more importantly, the purging of our hearts and the auditing of who we are and what our character is in light of what Jesus has done for us. So, how do we get leavening out of our homes? Great question, because it's not as easy as you think. Most people think of leavening as being like bread only. And while bread is typically where you find leavening, you find it in a lot of unlikely places too. The Hebrew word that's translated leavening in the Bible is seor, and it specifically is speaking about a starter dough. That is flour and water that's been mixed together and left out for the natural yeast in the year to ferment. This dough is then added to a larger batch of dough, and it leavens it. So things like bread and pancakes, cake and cookie, and some pasta are all out, along with everything else that my flesh desires. The kitchen is not the only place that you will find leavened food hiding. We also find it in our air vents, and our couch cushions, in the corners of your room. It's like everywhere, which makes sense because so are our desires to pursue the things outside of God's reign, things like sin and evil and corruption. For Christians, cleaning out your home of leavened products is truly a deep time of reflection, as well as an intimate teaching moment for your children. No, you won't be able to get the yeast out of your home because yeast is everywhere. It's in the air. It's natural. So, you can throw those bread yeast packets away if you want, but as long as they aren't mixed with dough or flour, technically they're not yet seor. Again, this is where different families do different things. So baking soda and baking powder are leavening agents, but they don't leaven unless they're mixed with flour and water. So you can decide on that one. Now, some people claim that beer, wine, and other forms of alcohol don't have seor in them, despite the fermentation process that takes place to create them. Wine has been a major part of the Passover for several thousand years, so it seems wine, at least historically, has never been seen as a leavened product. But again, that's debatable. There will always be opinions, ideas, and assertions, and so you need to stay true to what God is calling your family to do and also stay focused on what the point is. The point is not simply to get everything out of your home. If you get every crumb of leavening out of your home and still have arrogance, malice, and unforgiveness in your heart, you have achieved nothing. This practice needs to reflect what is happening in your heart, not simply in your home. And so, as we prepare our homes, but more importantly our hearts for Passover, the week of unleavened bread, and the day of first fruits, we need to remember this is not about a lamb that was sacrificed in Egypt. And this is not about bunnies and eggs and baskets full of candy either. As believers, this practice revolves around who this person of Yeshua is in our lives and His redemptive love. This should be a time of celebration, of fun and excitement. Why? Because Passover is a festival of freedom, not from slavery in Egypt or the oppressive powers of Pharaoh, but freedom from the slavery to sin and the oppressive power of death in this present evil age. We celebrate the victory through God's supreme love, His grace, mercy, and forgiveness. We celebrate victory in Yeshua this Passover. We wish you a happy Passover and week of unleavened bread from those of us here at Founded in Truth Fellowship. Shalom.